James Brown, it's a man's world, which is relevant for a conversation we might be having a little bit later with James Byrne, who is the Green Party candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority mayoral election, which is, James, in May?
Yep, 5th of May.
5th of May, thank you. And we're going to have a series of interviews with all, hopefully, the mayoral candidates over the next 2 months, just to sort of get an idea about what their aspirations are for the West Midlands Combined Authority and hopefully how they would all bring something different if they were elected to the mayoralship. But James Burns, I think first thing to do is tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, well, thank you very much for having this morning. So, my name is James Byrne. I have lots of different hats I wear at different times, but at the moment I'm the mayoral candidate for the Green Party for the West Midlands election, which is the first time the West Midlands would have had a mayor. So I am a social worker by profession. I mostly work in child protection, so I work commonly in kind of inner city areas with children who are particularly vulnerable, but I'm also a councillor in Chelmsley Woods, which is kind of on the outskirts of Birmingham in North Solihull, and I'm leader of the opposition on Solihull Council. So I'm a bit different than most politicians in that I not only lead the opposition but also have a fairly normal job and live in a fairly normal area. So so I'm quite pleased and excited to be part of this mayoral contest and helping people understand what it's all about.
So, Deputy Leader of Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah.
Just promoted you there. Thank you. on Solihull Council. So you've got a good cadre of Green councillors.
Yeah, we've got 10 councillors on Solihull Council, making us the second biggest. Yeah.
We had one in Dudley,
yes.
Will Duckworth. He's now somewhere in Europe. We know not where. Have you found that, particularly having a group of councillors like that, because we just had Bill Etheridge, who's one of eight UKIP councillors on Dudley. Do you find that sort of has given you a good political education over the last few years?
Yeah, so I actually got into politics largely by mistake about 10 years ago. So you'll find most people in political parties probably grew up with very political parents and from age 16 were doing stuff. And for me, it was quite different. So I didn't really even vote regularly till I stumbled into a job in my late 20s in politics. And I kind of found myself with all these politicians thinking, what in the world is going on? Who are these people? What do they stand for? So I decided to have a look at what all the parties were about and that kind of thing. And it also made me realise how much power politicians have over our lives. They decide how much money is in our pocket, if we can have a house, where that house will be. In social work terms, they decide if you can look after your own kids or not. So I decided from that point really to get involved in politics, and that's when my political education began. But yeah, seeing things from the inside as a councillor at all these meetings does really open your eyes to what's going on. And I guess this mayoral race too as well, kind of talking to all different groups and people all across the region is really kind of broadened that. But I think what I most value probably is that because I live in a fairly normal place and I do a job where I talk to normal people, that keeps me connected, I think, to normal people and their concerns more than some politicians. And that's really important because politics should be about making normal people's lives better when push comes to shove.
So for you then, why the Green Party? Why did you end up with the Greens?
That's a good question. So I always wrote off the Green Party because I thought they were like a party that just cared about the environment and climate change, and obviously that's important. I'm sure these days we'd all agree on that. But for me, as a social worker, as someone who's always cared very strongly about the least well-off areas, I kind of didn't think they had much to say. So when I was working in my job in politics, I looked at what all the parties believed, and I thought they were all kind of fairly similar. And so after a while, in desperation, on a very bored Wednesday afternoon, I looked at what the Green Party stood for, and I was quite surprised to find that actually they're about a lot more than just the environment. So a little known fact, the Green Party's first name when they started was actually the People Party, not at all the Green Party, and green meant something different back in those days, and green was a philosophy, a way of thinking about really valuing people and their environment together, and working together to make the world better for everyone, really. And obviously in the 80s and 90s the word green came to mean the environment, so everyone then assumes that's what we're about. I have said long that we should think about changing the name to reflect a bit more everything that we're about, but that's why the Green Party, because I think the parties in general, most of them just say, let's keep the current plan and tweak it a bit, And I think there are now some newer parties like ourselves who are saying that plan's not actually working very well. We need to be prepared to change it quite radically, maybe even rip it up and write a new one. So that's why I got involved with the Green Party.
And you've seen this little political compass thing where people can,
Yes,
you answer some questions to put you where you might be. I came across one of those online over the last few weeks, and everybody, who I thought was quite a varied sort of political beliefs, were putting in their answers and coming out with a spot not too far from where the Green Party resides, which is...
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Liberal left. So, not extreme left, not extremely liberal, actually, according to this political compass, but so many people end up on or around the Green Party.
Yeah.
So why does that then not transpose into better electoral success?
Well, it's an interesting one. So in the 2010 general election, there was a big website called voteforpolicies.com or .org, and it was a good one because it was blind. So you were given under each section, like crime and healthcare and education, 5 policies, and you were asked to click on the one that most closely matched what you thought, but you weren't told which party had each policy, and at the end it told you which party you should vote for. And the Green Party came out again number one, ahead of everyone by quite some way, because people love these policies. I think a large part of it, if I'm honest, is to do with money and to do with tradition. So most people in the UK know that because of our political system, you've got to basically work out which 2 parties can win in your area and vote for your least hated option. So people don't tend to love any party in our country, they just tend to fear one more than the other. And that means that a lot of people who would like to vote for the Green Party, unless they think they can win in that area, don't end up voting for them. So it's a lot to do with the political system and to do with whoever has the most money to pay for the most billboards and adverts and leaflets and all that kind of thing in the real world. But things are changing. I look at what's happening with our membership and how that's absolutely rocketed up over the last 5-10 years. I look at what's happened to our vote share, what's happening in Solihull and other areas, and things are changing. We won our first ever by-election from UKIP this week, which is really interesting. So times are changing, and I think what's really obvious from Brexit is that people now are willing to say, actually, we're going to look at some new options. If you can't get a house, if you can't get a decent job that pays decent wages, you're prepared to think about voting ways maybe you didn't before and wouldn't have 10 years ago. So I think our time is increasingly coming.
I know Will Duckworth, who was the Green councillor for Netherton and St Andrews on Dudley Council from 2012 until he decided to stand down last year. I mean, he was always quite clear. The only reason he got elected was because he worked really hard for years beforehand. In effect, he said he was a councillor, just not elected, and it was he became known personally in that ward. Yeah. But the Green Party have not been able to recreate that success. And interestingly, UKIP in 2014 in Dudley took 7 or 8 seats, I can't remember, across the whole of the borough. But again, I've only managed to recreate that in one ward subsequently. Is there something about the Green Party that they will be forever disadvantaged under things like first past the post and the lack of money, if you like?
Do you know what? 2 years ago, I'd have probably said yes. But nowadays, we saw what happened with Trump and with Sanders and with Brexit and Corbyn, and the world is a different place. And I think people are losing patience. I think most of the mainstream parties have said to everyone, vote for us or make your lives better. And it doesn't seem to matter who you vote for. Actually, the money in your back pocket tends to get less and less, and your children still can't buy a house near where you live. So I think people are ready to think about other parties more and more. Yes, it's still a battle. Yes, it's still hard work. But I think what you'll find in parties like the Green Party is people don't choose to join us because it's a quick and easy route to power. So maybe you tend to end up with some politicians who are maybe a bit more principled than others you might get in some other parties. But I think in Solihull it's interesting. I mean, last year in my ward, which is a very normal place, it's a big council estate area, we got 75% of the vote, which is absolutely massive for first past the post. So it goes to show that actually after a while people can start to understand who we are, but we have to start communicating that better. The Green Party is terrible at telling people what it's for and what it's about. I didn't understand what they're about for a decade, so I can hardly blame other people for not getting it either.
And we're going to be talking shortly about what the Green Party stands for in relation to the West Midlands Combined Authority and what your aspirations for that role would be, because I certainly have looked through, there are certain elements of it that you've got some concerns about,
Absolutely,
particularly around the accountability. And also why I played It's a Man's World by James Brown was because you have recognised that the current sort of makeup of the Combined Authority is very male, very middle-aged, and very white.
Absolutely. I mean, I said they're middle-aged, and someone who was middle-aged told me that was insulting because they're actually more old-age, I think. Yeah, I mean, we have a combined authority, which I guess we'll talk about what exactly that means a bit later, but is made up of basically mostly middle to older-aged white men and some big business leaders, and that's about it. And actually, my view is always that politicians need to represent the people they serve and need to live with them and like them if they can be expected to work on their concerns. So we need to make sure that that board is more representative. I'm the only young candidate standing for mayor. We have, from the main parties at least, not one person is from black or minority ethnic communities. There's only one woman standing to be mayor. So we need to do an awful lot more to make the board and the combined authority look more like the West Midlands.
And we're talking to James Byrne, who's a Green Party candidate for the mayoral elections on May the 5th. Hannah is on the tweets. If you want to get in touch with us, it's at WeAreBCR. You can text us. The text number is 64446. Start your text with the letters BCR. They cost you 10 pence, but let us know what you think. If you've got any questions for James, I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer them. But what we're going to come with, we'll talk to James next about his aspirations for the role of Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority. It's Black Country Week here on Black Country Radio with me, Ian Marrey, and Hannah Jones is on the tweets. And apparently our first hour has caused a bit of, what do they call it, a Twitter storm?
You can call it that, yeah. We've got Connor Hill tweeting a couple of things saying that I think it was Ian Cooper that mentioned about Paul Nuttall pledging to sell off the NHS in 2010, and Connor's just been sending some screenshots of that to say that did actually happen, which I think Bill disagreed with at the time. And then a couple of things about Tony Blair as well. Let's have a look. We've got Dave Bramwood saying, if Brexiters are so fond of democracy, why so scared of legitimate argument and debate? Blair is 100% right, but the wrong messenger.
Interesting stuff, but you know, listeners, we've moved on. We're talking about the West Midlands Combined Authority now. Let us know what you think. It's at WeAreBCR. And talking to James Byrne, the Green candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority. So, James, you want to be mayor. You want to be mayor of this new West Midlands Combined Authority. So that's the name it's going by now, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
What do you want to do as mayor?
What I want to do, I think, probably is two things particularly. So this essentially is a new council which is particularly set up to try and get everyone working better together, to try and address some of the problems we've got in the county. So one thing I want to do is make it a council by the people, for the people, basically. So I want to make sure that normal people are in charge of this council. They're the ones deciding mainly what happens and making sure it works for them. And what I particularly want to do is focus it on the least well-off areas. So if you do a map of where the least well-off areas were 35 years ago in the West Midlands and do a map of where they are now, you'll see it's hardly changed at all. So there are some real problems where there are areas of the West Midlands that are really struggling economically and the people there are having a very, very hard time, and some areas that are very, very wealthy. And I want to rebalance that, and I want to make sure those least well-off areas catch up. And that really matters because if you aren't very well off, that has a big impact on your life and how easy you find life and on your health, for example. So there were some really worrying stats out a couple of weeks ago that showed women in Wolverhampton on average are actually dying 11 years earlier than women in the more wealthy areas of the West Midlands, and that's a real scandal and has to change. So my two big priorities, I guess, are helping the least well-off areas to catch up and making sure that this council works for people and is kept honest.
One of the biggest criticisms of the West Midlands Combined Authority was it took power away from local councils, local people, and put it in the hand of, well, who?
That's a good question. Yeah, so personally, I have never been involved in politics in something which has been as undemocratic and strange, really, as this combined authority. So basically, George Osborne at the time, before Theresa May came in and got rid of him, decided that we would have these combined authorities and they would have a mayor whether or not we liked it. So you may all remember a few years ago, Birmingham were given a vote on whether or not to have a mayor and they voted against. Coventry were given a vote on having a mayor. They also voted against. And there's a lot of people now going, hang about, didn't we all say we didn't want this? And suddenly politicians have decided we have to have it. So that's how it came about. And it's very different to the way the similar London authorities come about. So in London, you have a directly elected mayor, but you also elect at the same time 25 what they call London Assembly members, who are basically like local councillors, but for this much bigger London authority. So just like with your local councillor, you elect them, you can ring them up and say, this isn't working, that's rubbish, there's a problem with this, and they actually represent your views there. And it took quite a while for all that to come about. Here in the West Midlands, literally a few months it took to set up this whole authority, and it's run by a board of people who are basically one councillor from each council who are the leaders of those council, plus 3 leaders from big business, and that's it on the board.
Yeah, so you mentioned that Birmingham, Coventry had said no to a mayor, that they didn't want it, but it was a prerequisite. You can't have the West Midlands Combined Authority without what they've termed the Metro Mayor.
Sort of. So you were allowed to have the authority without a mayor, but the government refused to give you any power unless you agreed to have a mayor. So it was a case of, your arm was behind your back. And again, none of the politicians really wanted a mayor. A lot of them will now say it's all wonderful, and of course they did. But if you go back and look at the meetings when this was first discussed, most of the councillors were very, very clear they did not want a mayor. It wasn't necessary, and they wouldn't agree to it. But in the end, they were given no choice.
And the local consultation on it has caused you a little bit of ire as well, hasn't it?
Well, not just me. So the House of Lords, the House of Commons have all had committees looking at this, and the words they've used to describe how this super council's gone about involving people and consulting people have been uncomfortable reading, I think, for the people in charge of the combined authority. And they've been really clear that we have to engage people more, involve people more, include people more. The Public Accounts Committee did a report in December kind of updating where they'd got to, and they still raise the same concerns. And I think that people have to feel this is their authority, because in the end, people are only governed by people if they give their consent to it and say, that's okay, I'll allow you to govern me. And actually, no one said yes to setting up this combined authority. They're not included in it. They haven't been really involved with it. And we have to change that. We have to make it so people feel this is my authority, just like they feel this is my local council. It has to be the same.
Now, obviously, you're standing to be mayor of this new authority. From a political point of view, do you believe that this type of devolution is the right way forward for this country?
The devil's really in the detail. So, in principle, I think devolution's a good idea. I think that the closer decisions are made to the people they affect, the better, because actually people on the ground know what would make their lives better and a better place to make that decision. Lots of bureaucrats in Whitehall have never been here. They have no idea about people's needs here. How do they know what's best? So in principle, I think it's a great idea. But then when you look at what's being devolved, what powers are being given to us and how, that's when things start to get a bit more concerning. So lots of my friends would say, well, this isn't really devolution. Actually, it's deflecting blame for cuts. So let's say the government run a service on £50 million a year, and they say, right, we'll give that power to run that service to the super council, but we'll cut the budget while we do it. So we'll give them the 30 million of the 50 to run the same service with, because then they get blamed for making cuts to that service rather than central government. So that's a real concern and a problem, and I think that's happening quite a lot. And I think the powers we've been given are quite limited, and government are more or less directing us in how to use those powers, and are very much cherry-picking which things we get. So it's not at all like Scotland, where they've said, right, here you go, take charge of all this stuff. Ours is very different.
Or even Manchester, Greater Manchester Authority has been devolved power for the National Health Service.
Yeah, which is a case in point. So they've been given power for the health service, but not all the money the government used to spend on it. So I think it's a bit of a poison chalice. I mean, you might be able to do things better by doing it locally, but can you do it better while doing it cheaper? Again, I mean, I'm not sure you can deliver Marks and Spencer quality at Woolworths prices all the time. It doesn't work that way.
Nothing wrong with Woolworths. I got my pick and mix from Woolworths, not Marks and Spencer's. That's for sure.
I had a bit of a crisis when they shut, but never mind.
I mean, so let's talk about the West Midlands Mayor. You're going to have responsibility for police.
Nope.
No, not for police.
No, so we elect a police and crime commissioner, another very unpopular post that no one really wanted. They got a very low turnout, and that person is responsible for police at the moment, and for the foreseeable future will remain responsible.
Because when I spoke to Derek, I always get his name, Jamieson.
David Jameson.
David Jameson.
Yes,
David Jameson's the actor.
Yeah.
David Jameson, about 18 months back, and he seemed to be under the pressure that in the course of time, the role of the PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, will be subsumed into the mayoral.
Yeah, he's changed his tune a bit on that over time. So a while ago, I think the assumption everyone had was it would be, but the funny thing about this combined authority is they've gone so fast. They've made a few kind of mistakes on the way. They've made life hard for themselves in the rules they've set up. So for any power to come into this new super council, the person losing that power has to agree to lose that power. So at the last meeting I saw he was at, when he was asked formally if he would agree to give up his post and have that power go into the combined authority, he said no. However, since then, I think he's now indicated that he will in the future say yes. I think in about 3 years' time, we'll see the two come together.
And so really, if you sort of headlines, the mayor's responsibilities will be, what are they?
Yeah, well, again, a very interesting question, which kind of shows how odd and strange this new super council is. So not many at all, because no one wanted a mayor. They've done all they can to limit the powers the mayor has. So officially at the moment, the mayor just has power over transport. And that doesn't mean everything. So that's just public transport, like Centro, basically. The mayor has power over what they call the key route network, which is basically the major roads we rely on for ambulances and fire services and that kind of thing. And the mayor has some limited powers to buy land, which you could use for making housing developments or industrial developments possible. And that's pretty much it for the mayor at the moment.
So will you be able to issue executive orders?
Sadly, we won't be able to ban Londoners from coming into the West Midlands anytime soon. No, not really. So the mayor, they will have an awful lot of soft power. So the mayor is going to be the chair of this combined authority, and it's been really clear from all the hustings and visits we've done, people expect this mayor to get things done and to have power, and whether or not people like it, this mayor is going to have more power over time. I think the idea was if they set up a mayor with very few powers, it wouldn't be so controversial because no one wants it. Then over time, drip, 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 they can give the mayor more and more powers when no one's looking. So I think we'll be electing a very different mayor in 3 and a bit years' time than we are this time.
So you say that you'll chair, I guess you'll chair these 8 white, male, pale council leaders and the business leaders who are also on it. I know a lot of these council leaders. They are where they are because they are powerful in their own right.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a bit of a job.
Yeah.
And it's trying to keep all of those egos, cross-party egos, personal egos, or all of them fighting as much for their own fightdom as they are for the sort of the greater West Midlands.
Yes. Well, just to be clear and to be fair, we've been campaigning long and hard for there to be other reps on the board as well. So small businesses, voluntary community councillors, unions, and as of yesterday morning, hot off the press, they have now agreed to co-opt a TUC rep onto that board as well, which is fantastic news. So I think the more of us that can talk about what's going on, the more pressure is to change. But you're completely right. I think that chairing those meetings will be a bit like herding cats, probably, which is why I think the Green Party way of approaching politics would be quite useful. So we believe very much in trying to work together with people, less using power over people to tell them what to do, and more working with people and using power collaboratively collectively to get things done together. And I think as a social worker, I'm more than used to working with families, professionals, managers at war, etc., and very conflictuous situations. So I probably have a few more skills in chairing a difficult meeting than most people do.
Yeah, transferable skills are always useful. We're going to talk a little bit more after the break about how it will work, and what the Green Party, what yourself would bring. You've touched on a few things, and also to have a look at this sort of the representation idea of the West Midlands Combined Authority. But we're talking to James Burns. He's the Green Party candidate for the West Midlands mayoral election, which is May the 5th. Please do get in touch if you've got any questions or comments. It's at WeAreBCR. You can text us. Start your text with the letters BCR to 64446. They'll cost you 10 of your new penny. Black Country Week with myself, Ian Marrey and Hannah Jones, and James Byrne, Green Party candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority, which is not the 5th of May. The election is the 4th of May. If you vote on the 5th of May, it's likely that your vote won't count. Just very quickly, talking about votes and code. There's a few hustings going on, but you did one. I think you did the first multi-candidate husting. And Andy Moore, who's a regular guest on our show and hopefully listening, he was very keen to point out to me that you won.
Yes,
you did. So what was? Tell us a little bit about that hustings event.
That one was. I'm trying to remember. It's a long time ago now. I think it was November. Maybe we've done that many. So that was the first one that most of us went to. At the time, UKIP hadn't chosen a candidate, and the Labour candidate has chosen not to come to any of the hustings at all so far. So it's just me and the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. And we were talking a lot about transport at that hustings, a lot about energy use, developing the economy, about these issues around democracy and that kind of thing. And so this doesn't happen at most hustings, but people were asked as they left to actually have a vote, to vote on who their preferred candidate would be. And about half the people there voted for me in the Green Party, which is really gratifying. But again, I think it just goes to show, as we were talking earlier, people really like what the Green Party stands for. And actually, if we can do a better job at getting that message out there, I think we can then start to put those policies people like into practice.
I guess that's why I wanted to raise it, because that was an opportunity for you to stand in front of people and to talk and put across your ideas. And what you found is that people are receptive to it, which goes back to our political compass, is that what you're saying is quite it's just a common value set to a lot of people.
Yes.
Interestingly, I also saw the results of that poll that Sean Simon, who didn't attend, also picked up some votes. So that's one of the issues. You actually don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And you will gather some people gather their core support.
Yeah, I mean, being in a smaller party is a bit like being at the Olympics in the 100 metres, and you've got the Conservatives and Labour whose starting blocks are 80 metres down the track, and we're starting back 80 metres the other way, and so they've only got to run 20 metres in the time we've got to run 100. So yes, you are disadvantaged, but I think cynics would say the reason that political system exists and it isn't changed is because the two parties generally in charge of our country, it benefits them quite a lot, and they don't want to see it changed. So another joy of being part of a small party. But again, I think people understand and respect and trust you a bit more if you don't take the quick and easy route to power, because you're obviously then not in it for the fame and the glory.
I'm going to give a shout out to the Express and Star. They're doing a mayoral hustings event at the Black Country Living Museum on the March the 7th. If you go over to the Express and Star website, you can still get tickets for that. And I think all the candidates have signed up for that, haven't they?
Yeah, I think that's probably the first one we'll all be at. Yeah.
Do you enjoy that type of sort of cut and thrust of debate on a panel stage?
So far, it's been really civil so far. I think in large part because Sean hasn't come to any of them. That's kind of probably made him and the Conservative guy argue a bit less. I mean, as Greens, we try and deal with politics a bit less playground, a bit more adult and grown up, because sometimes I've sat in council meetings and I've thought, you know what, if I behaved that way at work, I would be sacked. If I screamed and shouted at people, I wouldn't have a job the next day. How is it okay for the people we vote to represent us as politicians to behave in that manner? It's not. So I'm not really one for shouting and screaming to start with. If it's incorrect or I disagree, I'll say so, but I'm not going to insult or anything else. But I tend to enjoy them. There have been a lot of them. I think I counted the other day, we'll be up to about 75 hustings or media debates by the time the election gets here. So there've been a lot. But they tend to be interesting. I think what's the shame for me is how few ordinary people get involved. So we get an awful lot of business groups organising them, professional groups, that kind of thing. So far I haven't had one from a church or a faith group, any from any community group, and that means that their voices aren't heard, the mayors aren't thinking about their issues, and they aren't taking them into consideration. So when you start to see the same faces at the hustings again and again, you do start to think, surely there are some more people who want to hear from us.
Well, I guess I will say, Black Country Radio is a community radio station staffed by volunteers entirely. The difficulty in getting you all together for a hustings event, because you're in the studio now, you can see we have the space, we have a stage.
Yeah.
We could have invited people in. The difficulty actually getting you all together was really challenging.
I can imagine. Our diaries are pretty rammed.
Yeah, and I think it's, we've done general election hustings here for constituency base. We did an EU referendum debate, which we could pick and choose who we wanted to come to that.
Yeah.
But actually, it's quite a big area that you cover, isn't it? Well,
It is. I think, having said that, most of the hustings we've said yes to, that have tried to set up a date, they've managed to find one. But I think that the problem has been the area. So when you've got a constituency, a community group or a faith group feels a bit more, they can do that hustings and they can say, it's our area, come and talk to us. Because there aren't that many groups that cover the whole West Midlands, they're not really set up for it. So I think in 3 years' time, when people have got used to having a mayor, I think at the next election we'll see a more varied bunch of people wanting to hear from us. But this time so far, it's mostly been particularly business groups.
We've got a mayor in Dudley. He wears gold chains and a big long red robe. Is that what the mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority will be doing?
I don't know yet. I doubt it. I won't be. I can guarantee you I will not be being called your worship. I will not be wearing a robe and I will not be wearing any gold chains, even if they offered them to me. I think one of the problems has been kind of the name. So most of the councils, maybe all of them, I'm not sure, have a mayor already, but that's more like a ceremonial role. That's a mayor who goes and cuts ribbons and pats babies and goes to concerts and all that kind of thing, and is a kind of civic figurehead, really. This mayor is going to be a politician who's elected with power to make decisions, who is going to chair meetings and try and get things done, which is quite different from the role. So all those mayors you have currently will remain because they have a different role, but this one's quite different.
So it's not so. I can't actually ever remember Boris Johnson in chains. Well, maybe that didn't come out quite the way I meant it to come out. So very much a political role, and one of the things that you've got concerns about is the scrutiny of the West Midlands Combined Authority. I think you made mention earlier about the London Assembly, Assembly members who are elected to it to hold the mayor to account.
Absolutely.
There's nothing like that in the West Midlands.
No, so if we were in London, you would elect the mayor, and on the same day you would elect your local London Assembly members, who are just like councillors, whose job it would be to hold that mayor and the Assembly to account, to speak up for normal people, to make sure that that London Authority works for normal people. We aren't having that election here at all. We're just electing the mayor.
And looked at your website, there's a quote from a London Assembly member who was aghast at that, Councillor Russell. Stunned when I found out the West Midlands Authority had set up just one committee which will meet on 4 mornings a year to hold the whole thing to account. And unbelievably, the committee members are chosen by the people running the authority.
Yeah.
She's pointing out some potential conflicts of interests, lack of public scrutiny, lack of accountability, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one, really, because we need to make sure this mayor is held to account, because politicians, if they're allowed free rein and no one sees what they're doing, have a nasty habit of doing all kinds of difficult things when they're given power. It's really important people with power are held to account and there's checks and balances. So at the moment they are looking at these arrangements, but there are some fundamental problems. So basically the people on the board, these council leaders, they've all picked one person from their political party, apart from one, who's on this board. And the problem you then have is if people on that board start questioning and causing problems and criticising their own council leaders in their own parties, chances are those council leaders will go, thank you very much, I'll replace you with someone else who's going to cause less problems. You have to have an independent bunch of people who, being on that board, isn't dependent on them not causing a fuss, basically. So these arrangements are rotten. They're fundamentally rotten to the core and have to be changed. There's some great people on that committee who understand that and are trying to do a good job to change it. But we need to really involve more people. I would like to see them elected, ideally, But we need to make sure we have more people from more backgrounds and more parties. Like in the last regional election, Labour and the Conservatives between them got less than half the votes that were cast, and yet it's only Labour and Conservatives on that board. Everyone else is shut out. So, I think I've said before in other places and been told off for it, but I'll say it again. If we saw these arrangements in a banana republic, we'd be like despairing, and yet this is what we have here. It's not good enough.
So would you have the power, if elected as mayor, to change that?
So, obviously, the mayor has certain formal powers, but also no one can stop you from doing other things. So what I would do is I would set up an assembly. I would ideally have it meeting in the different council chambers around the country and move it round. And I would invite one councillor from each area, a broader area than perhaps they're elected to cover. I would invite local people, I would invite small businesses, I would invite the unions, volunteer groups to that assembly. And I would agree to come every other week or every month to have mayor question times, just like they do in London, so they can harass me, harangue me, ask me anything they want on behalf of local people, and they can suggest policy, they can scrutinise policy, and they can do the job of that London Assembly. It may not have a formal footing, but I'm more than happy to sign an agreement to say, yes, I will go, yes, I will listen, yes, I will take this seriously.
So not a democratically elected assembly, but a people's assembly, for want of a better
Yeah,
word.
I'm calling it assembly. Yeah, I mean, ideally I'd like it to be elected, but the cost of that and the power for that I wouldn't have. But I think that using the councillors who are already elected for them to come and speak up for a slightly wider area would work absolutely fine, because one thing as a local councillor I'm always really pleased about is they tend to do surveys every year of which politicians do you trust the most, MPs, MEPs, councillors, and councillors always kind of come out top, I think, because councillors don't get paid full time like MPs do. We don't have big expenses accounts. We tend to live locally and be about representing local people, and they're trusted, so I think they're a good place to start.
I'm talking about trust and its link to pay, and did I read that you have made a commitment in terms of the mayoral salary?
Yes, yeah. We don't know how much the mayor is going to get paid yet. That's still being discussed and debated. But what I have said really is politicians need to live with the people they're representing and live like them to understand their concerns. And actually, we don't need a multimillionaire running the West Midlands. We need someone who understands normal people. So I've said that I will take the average salary for the West Midlands, which I think is about 28,000, which is still more than the vast majority of people living here earn. And I will use the rest of my salary to try and help those least well-off areas improve. And until the income of the bottom 10% in the West Midlands improves, that salary won't go up at all.
And do you know if any others are committing to similar?
So I think Pete Donnell from UKIP has said he'll take the average salary. The Conservative candidate says he'll look into having performance-related pay, but he is, and I've said, well, that's fine, but what are you using to measure your performance?
And who, by the sound of it?
Yeah, and I think the Labour guy has said it's a matter for the committee to decide how much he's paid. I don't know what Beverley's said. I know Beverley is a woman from a very distinguished business background, and she has been quite critical of the idea of performance-rated pay and thinks the mayor should be motivated by public service rather than money to start with. But I'm not sure where she stands on the amount.
Oh, but it's something that sort of interests, because with MPs' expenses and various other bits and pieces that have happened over the last few years, it seems to have taken a life of its own, this scrutiny of what politicians get paid. My view is that, yes, that I think the public service argument is fair enough, but I don't think you should be necessarily disadvantaging people just because they choose to go into public service, because we're next. Mayors, nurses, social workers.
Yeah. Well, I think really it's about what is being a politician about. Is it about a career? And once elected, I'll do everything I can to get as much money as I can and stay there. Or is it about public service? And that's really the choice. But again, I'm not saying the mayor shouldn't be paid. I'm saying the mayor should get the average salary, because that's what most people here get. And that's still a fair salary.
You listen to Ian Marrey on Black Country Weeks, talking to James Byrne, the Green candidate for the West Midlands mayor elections on the 4th of May. What we're going to look at after the break is how does a West Midlands mayor look after the very distinct and individual areas like the Black Country? And I've also asked James to consider what song he'd like to finish the show with, and he panicked. When the idea of the West Midlands Combined Authority was first mooted, it caused uproar in the Black Country, absolute uproar. James, they were going to call it Greater Birmingham.
I know, I think it caused
How
uproar
dare they?
everywhere. You should ask the people of Coventry what they think about it, quite frankly.
It's not Greater Birmingham anymore. That
Nope.
got kicked into the longish grass.
Yep.
So, you're from Solihull? You represent Solihull people?
Sort of. So,
Chelmsley Wood, wasn't it?
yeah, so we fall under Solihull Council, but bizarrely our postal address is actually Birmingham, so we're kind of in a grey area, but yeah.
Because Chelmsley Wood, just completely off the subject, Chelmsley Wood was a fairly new town that was built to move people out of Birmingham City. So a lot of the people who moved there would have been Brummies.
Yeah, loads are still there. Yeah, and again, if you look at, I mean, we're about the same distance from Birmingham city centre as Solihull, and most people, when they say they're going to town, would mean Birmingham rather than Solihull. So we're a bit of a funny old outpost for Solihull, but it's helpful for me because it means I kind of understand and feel connected to both communities. And I work a lot in the Black Country, mainly actually I work in the Black Country, so I know all the areas. But yeah, people in general have not liked the Greater Birmingham name because people are proud, and rightly so. And I think in the Black Country, and to be fair in Coventry, there's a real identity. It is different. It's not the same place. Things work differently, people think differently, and it's not the same.
We also talk differently. We talk proper in the Black Country. We do.
Yeah.
So how, as mayor, would you ensure that all these sort of regional identities, sort of the Coventry, Shakespeare's Country, Solihull, Solihull, yes, the Black Country, Birmingham, and Birmingham itself. I mean, we often make fun of Birmingham here in the Black Country, but you know, an absolute. We have a symbiotic relationship. We've had a symbiotic relationship. The Industrial Revolution was born. Not just in the Black Country, but out of the Black Country in Birmingham and sort of Telford and Shropshire. Yeah. How do you maintain and separate and grow those regional identities?
I think actually it's got to be about growing them. I think that because of what happened, particularly in the early 80s, to the economy, people outside the Black Country, Birmingham, the West Midlands in general, don't have the kind of impression people did. I mean, we were the economic powerhouse of the world. You know, we had the highest level of income per house of anywhere in the UK until the 70s, really. And as you said, you know, we actually were the place the Industrial Revolution was born, the printed circuit board, the chemical industry, the steam engine, the pen industry. You know, actually, we have a massively proud heritage of making things and inventing things. And so one thing I want to do is I want to make Birmingham and the Black Country and the whole West Midlands somewhere people outside of look at and go, yes, they're about something. We know what they're about. They've got an identity. It's a proud place. It's got a heritage. And to grow it, because I've loved working in the Black Country. I started working here about 3 years ago, and I loved the fact it was so different and had a feel and an identity and different stuff happening in different ways. And it was such a shame that outside of the Black Country, people don't know about that. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done by the mayor about being proud of the area and talking about all the great things they have. So, I mean, for example, one thing I think is really awesome in the Black Country is the real ale culture. A friend of mine said they don't call it real ale in the Black Country, they just call it ale.
Indeed, yes. It's the only ale.
Exactly, yeah. So I think there's a huge amount going for us that we need to talk about far more, and we don't.
So, you're mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority. You're going to have leaders of Dudley, of Coventry, of Walsall, Sandwell, Birmingham,
Wolverhampton,
all sitting around your table with some business leaders as well. Now the TUC representatives as well, so representing workers, are all saying to you, shouting, "What about me? What about me?" I mean, where's the money coming from in terms of the inward investment? Because does the fact that we're leaving the EU have any bearing on the money that's going to come in? Does it reduce the opportunities for us?
These are all very, very good questions, and I think no one knows the answer. So, I mean, the economic plans for the Combined Authority were... a friend of mine who actually quite high up in the big business world says they're just pie in the sky now with Brexit because no one knows what's going to happen. We could be sitting here in 10 years' time going, wasn't Brexit the best thing ever? We're all millionaires. Or we could be saying, what a mistake. No one knows. So one thing I would say is what's sensible to do is start building a more homegrown economy, because what we do know is with Trump and with what's happening with Brexit, trading is going to be more tricky with other countries than it has been, and getting people to invest here to is going to be more tricky as well. So one thing we need to start doing is start really supporting and helping small businesses, medium-sized businesses in the least well-off areas to start up, to thrive, to grow. Because actually, if you're a business owner and you're from Walsall, say, and you start a business in Walsall, you're not going to up that business and move it to China or America or Germany if labour's cheaper there, because you live there and you're based there and your business is rooted there. So we have to start looking a bit more at building our own economy rather than being so reliant on money from overseas.
And you touched on it a few times as well, particularly around sort of smaller businesses, how we can encourage that. We talked about real ale. A lot of the real ale in the Black Country is based around craft.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 people in a cellar brewing beer. What a job. What a job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's clearly something that you would put high up there on your
Hugely
priorities,
high,
isn't it?
So basically, if we want to help the least well-off areas, what we need to do is root businesses in those areas that create decent jobs in those areas. And one of the reasons for that is if you open a supermarket in an area, for every £1 you spend in that supermarket, only 5p remains in that local economy area. If you open a local shop in that area, from every £1 you spend, 50p remains there. So the way to get money in these areas, flowing around those areas, so everyone's got more money to spend in those businesses who then have more money, and it keeps going round and round, is actually to make small businesses survive and thrive. And the thing about small businesses too is that's where it's at anyway. So about 8 from every 10 jobs that are created in this country are in small business anyway. So it makes sense to really try and help them survive to start with. They're the backbone of our economy.
James, I want to thank you for coming in today. We're heading up to the most important part of the show, and that's when you get to choose a song. Now, you'd asked for, I think, Firework by Roxette.
Yes.
Can't find it, but we've got another Roxette song for you.
Which one have you got?
Joyride?
That'll do.
You like Joyride? Okay. You've got about 30 seconds. How do you sum up your potential, your candidacy for being Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority?
I think, candidates have to be for something, and I'm for making sure this authority works for people, is run by people, looks like the people it represents, is kept honest, and makes sure the least well-off areas, like much of the Black Country, do a whole lot better in 10 years' time than they are now.
James Byrne, Green Party candidate for the West Midlands Combined Authority mayoral elections on, I guess it's a Thursday, the 4th of May.
Yes.
Wish you very much luck.
Thank you very much
for coming and spending the last hour with us. It's been a real pleasure and a privilege talking to you. And why Roxette?
Do you know what? Simply because I couldn't think of anything clever and topical. And I was talking to my sister yesterday, and it was our favourite band when we grew up as kids. So
I like Roxette as well. This is Joyride, and this is from James Byrne to the people of the West Midlands.